and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline, New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. John Velleca makes New Haven tick. He's a retired city assistant police chief. He serves as sergeant of arms at the state senate, meaning no crazy person's going to go up and bum rush the legislators. Thanks to John. Yeah. John is also WNHH's resident criminal justice expert, helping us make sense of the latest news, which he's here to do today. Welcome back to the studio, John.
Nice to be back.
Great to see you, man. And Harry Dross, our station manager, will be joining us. So you look at that empty chair if you're watching us on Facebook Live. Pretty soon, the man who's going to occupy that chair is Harry Dross. So, John, also thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, John, there have been 3 murders so far this year in New Haven. Yep. More shootings than last year, but a lot fewer than we used to have back when you were coming up. So, are we doing well?
Yeah, I think
is New Haven safe? Are things good?
Sure, by all standards, yeah, we're doing a lot better. I mean, it's almost unreasonable to think we're going to hold those numbers forever, to be honest with you.
Right, some crazy person going to spree, some people get out of jail, getting gang feud.
Right.
But it's been a steady downward trend. You had a hand in making it happen. Why doesn't it feel that? Why don't people seem to feel that way? Do expectations get higher? If we have the least violent crime we've had in a half century or more, and I know people like me feel comfortable walking everywhere in New Haven.
Yep.
But every time there's a crime, it's really upsetting, a major crime. So people get upset and they see, gee, you say crime's down. That's the one that always loves me. One I always love is, I guess shootings are down every time there's a shooting.
Right, yeah.
But is it that people have higher expectations, or is something afoot?
I think that, a lot of times we rely on the crime stats too much, and we don't really address people, how people feel, actually, the fear of crime. We just look at what the concrete numbers say what the crime is, instead of actually addressing what people seem to think, how they feel about crime, because we used to look at some of the neighborhoods and where, lighting and blight and things that were addressed, and trash pickups and things like that. Even when the crime stayed consistent, which was relatively high at the time, if the neighborhood was the quality of life improved, people felt that crime was down. So it's kind of, a misnomer.
So you feel like partly it has to do with how bright the street lights are?
I think it's how we're policing right now, to be honest with you.
And how are we policing?
Well, I think we're so low. I mean, the New Haven Police Department's in a bad way right now. That
because so many officers are leaving.
Yeah,
another
sure. And then you got,
by the way,
Tony Reyes is down with 3 assistant chiefs. So he's trying to juggle what he's doing.
He's the acting chief,
right? So there's not a lot of time to, sit down and strategize and think, what we can do to make people feel more secure.
And is the person feeling
just
on the
trying
street,
to stay above water right now.
Are they not seeing the person on the street, not seeing cops as often they might recognize? Because I know you have, for instance, a number of districts. We have 10 policing districts, and a number of them, one district manager is covering 2 districts, like John Healy's doing Beaver Hills and Dwight.
Right.
And also they shift around a lot. I think even more than they used to, although there always is a lot of turnover because we have a shortage of people in the top ranks, right? So you need to fill people different supervisory positions. Is that translating the street, or the fact that we have less crime and you have hardworking cops anywhere anyway?
Yeah, I think that I think you would have to go to the management team meetings and the block watch meetings to see what the residents get feedback from the residents and whether they're seeing the police or not. And if they're not seeing the police, that could be a supervisory issue, but it could also be, the caseload is, they might be just staying afloat at this time, to be quite honest with you, and they may not have a lot of time for anything other than that,
So we used to have a budget, I believe, of 490 cops, although we didn't really fill the whole.
When I came on, we had 502, and they're filled.
Wow,
they were
really
filled.
We had 502 back.
502, and a lot of that came from a cops grant. And that
federal policing,
that evaporated after 3 years, but through attrition, we were able to all keep our jobs.
And then now we're down. I believe we're under 400 cops right now, although we're budgeted for 420 or 430.
Right.
Now you mentioned there being only one assistant police chief now, but into this century, we had one assistant police chief. This is a new idea after the Billy White, after the corruption scandal we had in 2008 or 7.
Right.
7. We went to 4, and a lot of people feel we don't need 4.
Yeah, I think they're wrong, to be honest. I think that from a fiscal area, the police, even at $130,000, they're still going to make less than the department head, who usually in those positions made $160, $170, which affected the pension, right? But to go deep, don't forget, We did have one assistant chief, but we also had scandal after scandal after scandal every year. We had a lot of problems with executive command oversight, and that's what the issue was, and that's what Perf came in and said. So you broke
That's
up everything.
the Police Executive Research Foundation that
Right.
did a study and said you need 4. But do most departments have 4 police chiefs? I mean, there are 4 assistants in New York. There are 4 assistants in
Hartford does. Yeah. Well, Hartford's got a combination of one assistant, and then 4 deputy chiefs. The deputy chiefs now still maintain their union status. Bridgeport is very close to the same, I believe. One assistant chief that's administrative and out of the union, and then some ranking members that are still within the union, which is problematic, to be quite honest with you. But
because they're supervising people they're in the union with, so the union can't settle that dispute.
Right. It's difficult to be in the union, and then you're being grieved by union members, by saying that you're not following the contract, but it's your contract as well. It's like a conundrum. It's kind of like,
and that happens at every level. If you're a district manager and you oversee a beat cop, you're both in the union.
Right, but you can also, when you come here in New Haven and you got 4 assistant chiefs out of the union, you have the chief that's out of the union. The district manager always has the luxury to channel things upward till it gets to a spot where somebody who's not in the union could have the last say.
So you want there to still be 4?
I think we need 4. I do. I think we could probably get away with 3, but I think 4 is optimal. To be honest, you don't want your internal affairs. You don't want that meshing with anything else, right? And you have the 2 big divisions, which I think need their own chief.
Detective and patrol.
But
isn't there also someone in charge of patrol under a lieutenant under or a captain?
There is, but you would be surprised how much work at the executive level there is in patrol. We were missing on don't forget, for years we didn't report crime stats. We missed out on a lot of grant money that helped patrol with equipment and overtime and things like that. I understand that one part of it is they didn't want to report that because the stats look bad, but there's also another end of that has to think that people were just overloaded with work and weren't doing that, weren't looking for the grants, and weren't making all these meetings. They can only do so much. So yes, there's a patrol commander, but that's a commander that needs to be there too, out of the office. The deputy chief spends most of the time in the office, to be honest.
Gotcha. And Harry, when you hear all this, what do you think about 4 assistant chiefs in the city of New Haven?
I don't understand enough of it. I take whatever John says as gospel.
Okay. What about the feeling on the street in New Haven? Our statistics tell us we're the safest consistently now. New Haven's the safest it's been in our lifetimes. Do you feel that way?
I don't know well, yes and no, because you see more people on the streets than before. I don't know if it's just that the police here in New Haven actually know how to deal with people a lot better than other police forces.
That is true.
I agree. Yeah.
That is true. They really do. And you're listening to John Velleca and Harry Joes here talking about criminal justice on New Haven station for local community news, WNHH-FM 103.5, livestream.newhaven.org. Joanne Carter says, why district managers don't control the scheduling of their assigned officers. I didn't know that. So, like, if I'm in charge of, if Rosedale's in charge of the Westville West Hills, she doesn't get the schedule.
Right. She doesn't set the shifts. I think that's what he may be talking about. And he doesn't. And they set the beat parameters. So in other words, they'll tell you where they want a 9/11 response car to cover or a walking beat to cover. However, but they won't be able to set the shifts, the time the officers are in and the time the officers are not. That's by contract.
Well, we have A shift, B shift, C shift. But you're talking about she doesn't get to decide how many officers in her district are working each shift.
No. She gets a lot. She gets allotted a certain amount of officers, and she puts them where she's essentially told to put them, because the overall deployment per shift, A, B, and C squad, and the number of officers on each shift comes from the assistant chief in charge of patrol, and it's based upon, we base it on a lot of things. We base it on call volume. We base that on, when you look at what times of day.
And presumably they can say, like in Westville, they could say, well, once a year on this Friday night in May, we get 5,000 people coming to art galleries for an art event. I think I should have. Can we get an extra person that night?
On overtime? Yeah. It's overtime.
Yeah. It's not regular. She can't move around the scheduling.
In other words, say hypothetically, May is a busy month, whatever, for whatever reason. Maybe let's say June because the kids are going home from school. No, you can't take. You're not allotted X amount of officers for A, B, and C, and then she cannot individually move officers off a different
Why
shift.
wouldn't you want? And Joanne says, "Thank you for the clarity. Thanks for the question, Joanne. Why wouldn't you want some flexibility for managers to say, this week it makes more sense to have more people on B than A,
Right.
and next week I'm going to need an extra bunch
Yeah,
of
you
people on
would.
C."
You would, but that's the management perspective. So the union perspective would be: listen, you're gonna jockey our guys around all the time. You're gonna move their shift. They have the right to set a shift. So I don't want the guys that are assigned to District 6. I don't want them to go to because the district manager has a tendency to move your shift every day, right? So that'll be the rebuttal from.
Could
the
you have
union.
some floaters? Could you have some people guaranteed and some flexibility?
All that stuff is going to be determined through collective bargaining. Sure, it would make sense to have that.
Well,
but
you've been on
unless-
both perspectives. You've been in charge of the department. You've been at the beat level.
Right.
Who's right?
I tend to think the management aspect is right. I think that if you have anywhere else you have employees, you have the ability to move them around. That's going to fit the agency the best. So I would say, from the management perspective, I would like to see that. But I also see that that was given up in bargaining, and that's going to have to be bargained back. And the reality is that that's a steep bargain, and we would probably have to give way too much to get that.
Hey, you guys, there was the odd string of cases this week. Did you follow the shootout in Ardsley, New York, in Westchester County, outside a motel? Big shootout. FBI
With
just loaded up.
Galbraith, right?
Yeah, and a bunch of New Haven people.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 3 separate crimes going on. You got this kind of sense they were being talked about. They were very different, but they all ended up at this Ardsley motel this week. There was a shootout. There's a guy named Sam Galbraith that came from around here, and he was wanted for one crime, and he got shot dead. He was on the run, and then he was the first cousin of a guy named Tremaine Poole, who had been on the run and got killed in a shootout last year for killing that woman in West Rock in front of her kids, like Takeisha Nesbitt.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he was suspected. There was another guy in that room who was just suspected in that motel room who was just suspected of bank robberies. He was 55. He was 55 years old.
Yeah.
And he's there and he gets arrested. He was also sexually assaulted. And then there's a third woman who had been missing. And the last she'd been seen was with another New Haven woman who was found murdered in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
Tamika Jones. So you got
Tamika
one
Jones,
woman
right.
missing while her friends murdered with her. You got an older guy who did bank robberies, and this guy in his 30s who was I guess he was suspected of involvement. What was Galbraith doing?
I don't know.
I
I
think it was
just recognize the name. Sam Galbraith has been in the mix for a long
Wasn't
time.
there another Galbraith too that went back
there's a
to the
few
early
of them,
90s?
but Sam has been he's been around. He's been around the block.
And he's dead now.
He's dead now. Yeah.
So how did all 3 come together?
I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I don't know. That's an odd combination. You would have to really dig into that.
I'm trying to think why they were on the motor, because I'm getting a sense that we're going to find out that these 3 very different crimes had some connection to each other.
You would think so, right?
But the 55-year-old guy who was robbing banks.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could tell you.
This could be a mystery. Joan Carter, another question. What can we do to support our youth who desire to become local officers who can get jammed up while waiting after they graduate from high school and the age to take the exam?
No, that's a good question.
How old do you have to be? 21?
21, right? Yeah.
And now Seth Poole, who's running for mayor, wants to make it 25. He says that's when people have much better judgment and more maturity.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, if you go by, we talk about it all the time, the development of the brain until you're 25 years old. But,
Right, like I said, you shouldn't be able to drive males.
Right.
25.
I don't know how feasible that is because people usually start their career in their early 20s. Somebody's
Right.
2 or
Teenagers
3 or
need to
4
drive
years
if you
into a
live in a
career,
nice urban area.
and they may not come out. But I think that what's the program Michael Jefferson does where he gets the youth, the kids. Can't remember the name, but I think that if they get involved with social programs like that, I think that we should bring back I shouldn't say bring back because I'm not sure if we still have. Do we have the not the junior police, but what did
Youth
Lewis
adult,
call
the police commissioners?
No, that's a great program too. And the mentoring program that was here in
Oh, yeah.
Waring was a good program, which probably should come back. I always thought that was good. The young adult police commissioners, yeah, that's
What
a great
about
one.
Joanne's
But the
question
cadets,
about
the
oh yeah, we have the cadets still. I think
right,
the woman
yeah.
who
So
to
to be honest with you, you don't want to get too much in the abstract, but I do think that what we should do as a police department is move away from low-level picky unit arrest to begin with. To be honest with you, I think if you were to set up, I think that we should have always. One of the things I wanted to do when I was chief, but I left, and Esserman came in and he didn't buy into the idea, was convene a small review board that looks at all these interfering and disorderly conduct, all these nonsense arrests, right, at the base level, and review them. And if they're nonsense arrests, petition the state's attorney to drop them. So we're not starting these kids off with 2 and 3 and 4 nonsense arrests and convictions. Not like how the Second Chance Society. I agree with the Second Chance Society, but why make it so they don't need a second chance? In other words, you know what I mean. So why
make
not
it a
give
first
them,
chance society?
Right. So you look. I hate to be the guy that says the suburbs, but in the suburbs, let's say, a lot of times a young guy will get a break from the local police and say, "Listen, I don't want to ruin your life." How many times do you do that with a Yale kid, right, or another college kid? You say, "Listen, you got a good life ahead of you. We're not going to mess it up." But we don't seem to do that with the kids in the impoverished neighborhoods. We just lock them up and throw them away. We don't care if they get charges on them. So I think if we stop that whole thing, and then, when they go to take the police test, they don't have that nonsense they have to deal with, the disorderly conduct or the, marijuana possession or whatever the hell it was.
Do you think they should be able to apply at 18, to Joanne's point? That seems young to me.
I say it's tough. 18 years old is right. I came on at 21, and it was very difficult. It was a learning curve through most of my 20s. In other words, I felt that I didn't have any of my 20s because I was forced to grow up so fast. 18 is kind of young. I mean, there are people. Listen, there are people that can do it. There are a lot when they changed that. I think in 1989 or 90. But a lot of cops I worked with came on when they were 18, and they did a fantastic job. I mean. So I can see it, but then I could see why not to do it as well.
All right, John P. Stowe says bridge programs through PAL, that's Police Athletic League, and Police Explorers. That's the word I was looking for.
Police Explorers, yeah.
They do a really nice job with that. And Seth Poole, I can't see his old comment here, but I think Seth is saying nice T-shirt. What does your T-shirt say? Stick up kids, corrupt cops.
Well, tell Seth I was on the
rocks.
radio, and I didn't figure I was. Yeah. It's a Wu-Tang Clan lyric.
Oh, and why are you wearing it?
I just like the Wu-Tang Clan. I was running out the door. I was late, so I figured.
But you came on to Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM, livestream.NewHaven.org, 103.5.
I have to watch what I wear now.
No, you use it. Welcome to wear anything. And Harry, thanks for fixing that screen for me. Did you guys read what was going on with the latest with how the FBI surveilled Martin Luther King? Have you been following the latest controversy?
I didn't see it, no.
Okay, so we knew for years the FBI was wiretapping and monitoring King.
Right.
And trying to get him and other black leaders to kill themselves. They took a lot of recordings of him having sex in hotel rooms with other women. They sent him a recording and an anonymous message saying, "Here's what we have. Time to end it. You've created so much shame."
Wow.
And then the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, had a memo that said we have to make sure there's no black messiah, other groups too. There's a guy named David Garrow who's done some of the most important research into all that. He's older now. He wrote some famous books. I think he won a Pulitzer Prize, stuff like that. He's now getting flack because they've declassified a bunch of information from an unrelated case. And in it is a memo where someone hand wrote in the FBI that Martin Luther King watched a fellow minister rape a woman and cheered him on.
Was laughing.
And laughing. And so the criticism is we already knew that the FBI was making up stuff about people. I did a book on this. The Black Panthers, they would say so-and-so's having sex with your best friend. So they try to get them kill each other, and they did kill each other sometimes.
Which is the murder in the Motor City?
Yeah. And then and other people also say it's an uncorroborated one-person report anonymously by a group that was making up stuff. How can you publish that to destroy his reputation? What was interesting to me was there's a feminist scholar at Yale named Beverly Gage who's writing a book about Hoover who said, I actually think it is important to put in there with the strong context that doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean what they were watching. And we do have to deal with how women were treated in the movement. And then another part was saying, how do you use anonymous allegations by law enforcement that never brought up in court or proved to besmirch reputation? Harry, seems like you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on it because Martin Luther King was probably my first hero, right? So, and in death, right? So everything I grew up learning about him was good stuff, right? And I've read all of these reports, but the problem is that a lot of these guys, you can't believe anything they wrote. They were making up stories.
The FBI, you mean?
The FBI.
Yeah, we know that.
Okay, they were making up stories, and where this report is coming out of, they're notorious for making up stories.
Right.
And you're gonna take one story from some guy who
without a name
who you know was probably making it up. You're gonna take that and you're gonna attach that to Martin Luther King? Are you kidding me?
He's
Right,
saying,
right.
he says, the researcher, I'm putting this out in the public record to show, although he seemed to believe it might be true, because he said, I've talked to people in the past who heard the same tape. Although even hearing the tape doesn't mean, you know what I mean, that it happened exactly that way.
That sounds like
Too many falsehoods.
Well, I think you and I have even spoken about this in the past. Law enforcement, I think now in this age, it has become some agencies. I don't want to classify everybody, but it's the typical non-prosecutorial prosecution. They don't find evidence, right? They operate under qualified immunity. They could go look through everything and anything they want, right? And they may not find evidence of a crime, but they're still going to make you look bad. So they're going to say, they're going to qualify what they say. Listen, it's not corroborated, but they shouldn't be able to do that. I would omit those from my officer's report. I would scratch them out because I think there's any place for that.
And I like what John just said there, because it's exactly what's happening with the Mueller report, where he shouldn't have come out and said anything unless he had something to charge.
What about
Unless you can
sex
back
lives?
that up.
What about sex life? So with Bill Clinton, the crime he allegedly committed for being impeached was that he lied about whether he had sex with an intern. With Donald Trump, there's all the stuff should come out about his sex life and the porn star and the PP tape and all that.
Yeah.
Should there just be a line in which we're not looking at people's sex lives? And if law enforcement does, unless there's a crime of assault,
well, you know how I
should
feel
just
about
keep
this.
that out.
This is, listen, right. If you ask me, let's talk about quickly New Hampshire, right? I did a great job in there as the chief. But I pissed off some people, and they reached into my personal life, right? So what does it matter, really, what I'm doing in my personal time?
But if it's with an employee, that does matter.
No, I'm not sure if it does. What Julie Johnson and Herb Johnson? I mean, how many you could run through Stephanie Redding, Pat Redding? You could run the gamut. 68% of relationships begin in the workplace, Paul. So now should you do that? If it's not a crime, absolutely.
But what if there's a complaint? Just theoretically, if a complaint is filed that someone says my boss
sexually harasses me, different story.
Different.
Yeah,
that's different.
That's a different story. But if there's a relationship,
but
and I think that Clinton got into
gets murky,
right? But hypothetically, but there's a double standard here. So if it turns out where it works out and you get married and you live happily ever after, it's okay, right? But if it's not, then it's not okay. But I think the thing with Bill Clinton anyway, and I'm a Clinton fan, you know that he lied during a deposition.
But should they have been going there in the first place?
Well, Bill Clinton decided to actually,
that's a great question. I mean, does it make it different that he's the president? I'm sorry.
No. Well, make a difference that he's the president. He decided to sit down and talk with them, right?
But it happened in the Oval Office too. If it happened somewhere.
And an intern. There's a balance of power with a president intern. But there were people wanting him for other things, including some sexual stuff that was fair game.
But when you say the balance of power, though, that's never ever been acted upon.
And an intern?
It's never been acted upon. That's your perspective.
I was a Clinton supporter and everything at the time. I was a big Clinton supporter, right? And if you heard the conversation between regular people who aren't political or anything, they were saying, "Oh, Bill Clinton, he's in trouble for a blowjob and all of that," right? So, to the people on the ground floor who don't know anything about anything, who don't even care about a deposition or anything like that, they think that he was targeted for a blowjob. But
was him lying under oath.
Was him lying under oath.
But it was about that sexual act.
But then, so you're like, in other words, I would like to see how this would have played out if he initially just said, "Yeah, I did."
But what I'm wondering is, I wish he had been prosecuted for using state police to bring Paula Jones into a hotel room and raping her.
That's as governor. That's as governor.
Right. That's the stuff that bothers me.
Misuse of police. Sure. Listen, that happens. That happens everywhere, my friend. I have news for you.
Yeah.
Believe me.
And
that's awful.
That was as governor, and it should have been taken care of before he ever ran for president. Right.
Yeah.
So, coming from the guy who used to run the intelligence unit, yes.
So when you ran the intelligence unit, did you ever say, "Hey, this is something we don't need to be getting into"? I'm sure you heard about. I'm sure you heard about people's sex lives all the time. And what did you do about
petition from higher ups to go look at certain people.
Really?
Absolutely, 100%. Anything, and
just
you have
to get dirt,
and you have to put the brakes on it and say that's not what we do.
So someone once said to you, "I want to get dirt on this person."
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And was it for political reasons?
I'm not going to go there because I don't want to expose anything who it is. I'm not saying yay or nay to that. Okay.
Well, you're not saying nay.
Well, I'm not saying yay either. All right?
Well, think about that, right?
And I'm not saying that it's anybody in the city of New Haven. There have been petitions to the unit to look into certain people to.
Well, I know in Dick Lee's day in the '60s, they would political opponents like the Hill Parent Association stuff. They would be monitoring them to see what they did.
Well, Brennan,
we would never do
sat
that,
down
though.
with Harry Reid to go over intelligence on Trump, and Trump was just the candidate. So, I mean, come on. It happens all the time.
All right, and it happens here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM, your home for community with John Velleca and with Harry Jost. Now, dirt bikers are big in the news again.
I seen that, yeah.
And ATVs. People come on
and
the
drag
street.
racing, I saw.
They're drag racing on the streets in New Haven, really threatening people's lives. The racers, let 2 dirt bikes slammed into a car in Chaplain High. The people went to the hospital at rush hour last week. The people are worried about their kids right there on the sidewalk. They're very hard to catch. We don't chase in New Haven. People say it puts the cops and the riders in more danger.
It does.
Are drones the answer? What's the answer?
That's a tough one. This has been going on, God, since I was in patrol in the early 2000s. You know, and drag racing on Longworth was a big deal. You know what we did.
You could shut down with having cops there and stuff.
We can shut that down, sure, but you know, it's not really shut down. It's displaced. You know, and we're pushing them to somewhere else. We always thought, and I credit Joe Strito. Joe Strito's idea before he left was find an area. Can we find an area for them to do this?
Although sometimes people say they want to be flipping the birds to the cops. They take the video.
Some of them do, but some of them literally, you know, we would stop them and interview a lot of them. And I think you gain a lot of intelligence by doing that, being friendly with them and following on Facebook and things like that. They're building their cars and they want to race. All right, it's not an optimal thing to be on the street.
What about the biking? The ATVs?
The biking is you know what? I got to be honest with you. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
It is totally a tough one. Because you don't want to make it worse with the chases, but you don't want it to go on. And people come from London and Hamden, and
you can't chase. But I understand I mean, you got to try and investigate it without chasing to the best of your ability. I mean, drones could be the answer, sure, but then don't forget about. But everybody talks about this technology, but the technology always has to be balanced against the intrusion to people's civil liberties. So sure, what happens though the day when we're using a drone to follow a kid on a dirt bike and we pick up on something else that we wouldn't have seen? I mean it's like a
definitely
double-edged
moving there.
sword,
Look at China. Yeah, people are worried about that, but we're not going to give up. Like they're talking some San Francisco, other places they're banning facial recognition technology by cops.
I think it could be too much. I'd be honest with you. I think it'd be too much. When do you get to the point where you leave the community and society alone to try and live their lives on their own without intervention for
so what would
us
you
coming
do for
in
dirt
there?
bikes?
I would have to really study this thing before I even said anything. I don't know exactly what they're dealing with. If it's the same thing when I was there. If it's the same thing when I was there, I'm not really sure. If a plainclothes unit is the answer to this, something like that. We did have a lot of success in interviewing a lot of people they pulled over, and they could tell you who in the neighborhood had the bikes.
Monitor online when they say they're coming to New Haven,
right.
So they sometimes get word of that.
But there's a lot of times where we found out there was like 1 or 2 people in the neighborhoods that were fixing the bikes or selling the bikes.
I remember one of those guys at Sherman.
Right. So if you could close them down, so your bike is no good if you can't ride it, right?
So that's one thing you got. The other problem is the people not from New Haven, and there are a lot.
Yeah, sure. I see them. Believe me, they whip by me all the time.
I don't know what it is about New London, but they like to race here. Gage Frank says hi, John. So Harry, what's your take on the dirt bikers and the ATV riders?
Well, for me, I think because it's already happening. You drive up Whaley and
yeah, I've seen them.
So my thing is when I see them, I stop, let them go.
Right, that's the best thing.
And everything. I think other drivers have to, because people get road rage because this is happening in front of them. But
Harry, are you advocating just having these people take over our streets?
I'm not, but you're not going to make it any better by...
I'm not disagreeing with you about get out of the way, but that's not the answer.
It's not the answer, but for me, that's the advice to drivers. I've seen other drivers hit the gas to try to send a message.
Right.
And
that's crazy.
Yeah,
what do you think the police should do?
The police... I think it's a hard thing. I mean, these people pop up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're in traffic.
Yeah,
I don't know. And then the drone thing, it's a privacy issue for other stuff. I mean,
I'm not huge on the drones. I'm not going to lie to you for anything. I mean, emergency, our TAC units, agreed. They can use them to get the layout of the house and see what's going on. But as far as everyday police work, I'm not sold on it.
And
to
I
be quite
wonder if
honest with
it's admissible if you're flying the drone and you see the crime.
you. Right. And then you
Another
see
crime
something else
happening,
and what's
you see-
going on
right,
over here. And
So
using the drone, you got to look into somebody's second bedroom window that you wouldn't
so
have
it's
had
like-
before, and you saw something going on. What do you do?
is is it going to be admissible that you were using the drone for this, but you found that?
Right.
That I don't know. It gets complicated.
Yeah, and then we all know what goes on from there. A cop working a case on a house over here says, "Oh, I'm going to send a drone to
Exactly.
wink, wink. Look at dirt bikes down the street."
All right.
And I just happened to find out what happened on the second floor of the house.
Hey, we talked about how there have been 3 murders this year, which is not a happy thought, but so
Right.
many fewer than we used to have.
Yeah, sure.
One of them got solved really fast. It took place May 21st in the Hill at Rosette and Congress. There was a guy from Seymour who has a pizzeria in Waterbury,
Oh yeah,
and he was coming to buy a lot of marijuana. And he got in a fight with the guy he was supposed to meet up with, and they were trying to rob him, and he goes after him in his truck, and he starts shooting, and he kills one of them. What did you think about that? Like, some people thought, and the guy kills from Milford, they thought, why did people come into the hills to do this? And didn't we just legalize marijuana in Massachusetts? I mean, technically you're not supposed to drive it over the line, but do people even need to be coming to buy marijuana this way? What was going on, you think?
I don't know.
Well, you see, that's going to be that Waterbury not passing recreational marijuana is going to be a problem. I mean,
In
not Waterbury,
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Not
Yeah.
passing it is going to be a problem because you're sandwiched in between states that are legalizing it. So what are you going to do with these people who and all you're doing is you're allowing the illegal marijuana to
Right.
flourish here in Connecticut.
But even then,
So
I
it's
don't
just-
think you'll see. I think that was an aberration. That you won't see that a lot because when we talk about how
And
you,
it could be other drugs, too. You could have that fight over crack, right?
right, but the thing is, that's why we talk about redefining community policing, the broken windows theory, and quality of life issues, all those things used to be public nuisances, right? And all these public nuisances now, like drug dealing, are driven indoors, right? So, what's a broken window now? You know, what is a quality of life issue now when we don't have the public disorder that we used to have, right? So, do they have to come to New Haven? No, God, no. They could do, go on the internet.
So why do you
and
think that
call-
guy was coming to New Haven?
Who knows? I mean, we'd have to ask him. There's got to be a specific reason to him,
Yeah.
right? That's got to be an isolated incident, Paul. I don't see. I just
Yeah.
don't see it. I'm not saying that there's no street corner drug dealing anymore, but certainly not the
A
way
lot
it
less.
was.
Yeah. I mean, if you see some.
Well, some people still live by cash transactions.
Yeah. Well,
So
listen,
but that
they,
you can
they,
still do in
they,
Southern
yeah, they still meet up. I mean,
Yeah.
Although people like to go in their
I
car,
mean, it's
too. I
different.
see
It's
people in their
different now
cars
because you
sometimes.
could, like you said, you could actually do everything on the internet now with Bitcoin. You could send your money.
but Harry, they don't even do it. When I
To
was in
whoever.
narcotics, what was in Paul knows. See Click Fix was like the best thing for narcotics because people would see these hand to hands done from vehicles would pull up, do a quick hand to hand, and then go. It wasn't even Bitcoin. It wasn't even on the internet. It was just a cell phone call to somebody, and then they meet on a remote street, and they do their business.
Right, but now think about
And all the people that could use Bitcoin, right? Yeah.
But think about the transactions now. Do you pick up people for handing each other stuff
Yeah.
without any money transaction because you don't see
Are most people really
The
using
money.
Bitcoin? People down and out drug people are using Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
They do, yeah.
They use Cash App,
Cryptocurrency, Vimo, all kinds
yeah,
of
yeah, Venmo and everything. So it's look, you don't have to exchange cash anymore. Now, is it illegal? Or are you gonna stop somebody for just actually handing over something to somebody?
Right. It's not as easy as it
It's
used
not-
to be.
yeah.
That's the
So-
beginning of an investigation hours before it's the end of a job.
Hey, did you guys, when you saw the fatal fire last month in the Hill, and there was a slumlord who was
Yeah.
illegally converting a house into a lot of apartments, the smoke detectors didn't work, although that could have been tenants taking them out if there's people smoking drugs in there and
Yeah.
stuff, or cooking and not wanting to
I
go
thought you
off.
said that she disabled them. She was known to disable them because of cooking or something.
Yeah, I don't
Wasn't
know.
that or no?
Well,
More
there were a
than-
lot in the
more than
house. None
likely.
of them,
Mm.
none of them were working in the house.
Yeah.
What was the role in police and all that? We know about inspectors have a hard time keeping up with 25,000 housing units in the city, apartments that are should be under a licensing program. Only 6,000 are, and it tends to be the landlords who want to participate and don't need to be watched as closely. We have only 4 inspectors for that. Any thoughts about police role in these kind of situations that could turn fatal like that? Housing.
Go ahead.
I don't think so. I mean, the police have enough to do. it's like in New York where they have police basically on blocks giving tickets and going after people selling Lucy's and all of that stuff. What do you?
But there's info sharing, for instance. So a cop goes in
Right,
a
that's what I
house
was
and
gonna say,
notices, hey, this place is going to run down.
You don't get the response
I
Paul you
don't
used to
think so.
get though. When I was a patrol officer, if you saw that and you called LCI, you would get somebody in the middle of the
City
night.
Initiative, the anti-blight.
Yeah, they would be there quick. And I noticed that when I became a supervisor and I went back to patrol what was it, 2004 as the shift commander, you couldn't get somebody from LCI out. So if we went in there and we saw what was going on, like that building, somebody with makeshift apartments and they're running, wires and cables and everywhere else, you would call and report it, right? Nobody would come. You would simply covering our own butts, make sure we referred it to LCI, but there was very little follow-up,
Or
So
could there be
you
more?
can't shut.
Yes,
you
I
can't
think it
shut
could
a
be.
place down, right? Because
I
it's
cannot shut the place down.
He
People
can't
are
do
living
he
there.
can't do housing code.
People
yeah.
are living there.
right. So I mean, what can a cop do?
What we used to do, what was relatively effective, Harry, was to actually call.
Do the referral?
Right, but then they would come. So we would stay on scene until they arrived, and then
Oh, they would come right
they
away.
would come, right? And whatever they did, if they got grief from the tenant, I can enforce that kind of law at the behest of the LCI inspector.
I wonder what was the staffing back then for LCI.
I don't think it
That
was
was
a
a-
lot more.
Yeah, I'm not sure too. It was a big push on that though. That was a big quality of life thing for us. That was like every shift as the boss you had to fill out how many LCI notifications and things like that.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is
100%.
stuff that can be done.
Yeah.
With cooperation, and they have a new app. They're rolling out in the city where all the cops and inspectors and from different departments can have access to all the information on one property that the
Oh, that's a
different
good idea.
departments
That's
are
a great
doing. I
idea,
think
yeah.
that's a really good idea. So I hope that one rolls out well. The any news on the Hampton? We heard all about for a few days the Hampton Yale cop coming to Millville, shot up that car and hit a woman, 2 unarmed people in it. And then we haven't really heard much about it as it goes on. Do you have a sense whether they're going to criminally prosecute either of those cops?
I would be surprised if the Handman cop didn't face some degree of prosecution. Whether he
We're talking about
trades a
the
resignation
April
for
16th, where he just came with a car. He had a report. It was armed
Yeah.
robbery. It was turned out not to be robbed. And now
I think the Yale cop is okay. I think that he makes
because bullets started flying and he started firing. He didn't
right,
know
and
where
he
they were
gets
coming
hit.
from.
It's very logical to think he returned fire, thinking that the officer was under fire because he's hit.
Now, when is a police officer criminally liable for making mistakes? So there were a lot of mistakes here. The 2 officers who came never notified dispatch in either department. We're now at the scene of someone who's wanted for alleged attempted armed robbery. But they never said we're going to approach the car now.
Yeah.
They never put their lights on. They didn't put their body cameras on at first. One never did. The other did it halfway. So those are all definitely disciplinary issues and training issues. When is it criminal? So, you can't really justify he just started firing with this car, which is really weird. And first he fired at the driver who followed an order to come out and put his hands up. So the officers often say, well, I mistakenly thought there might be a gun. You don't usually get prosecuted then. But then he walked around to the passenger side of the car. This is the weirdest part that I still...
And he kept firing, which is weird.
He started firing again at the passenger window where a woman was sitting.
That was such a strange video. It's just
But so when
you
is it
wouldn't believe it
criminal?
if it wasn't on video.
But I'm getting a sense, John, from talking to criminal justice people, that we actually view criminal questions about officer conduct differently from the way we did 20 years ago, like with the Malik Jones case, where they all said the Malik Jones case, when the officer in East Haven followed this guy, didn't know who Malik Jones was on a suspected traffic violation, high-speed chase across the bridge into Fairhaven, boxes him in his car into a lot, runs up to it, jumps at the car, smashes the window, and then says, I shot him because he gave me a go-to-hell look, and the car was rolling back and first trying to run me over. And I remember talking to the prosecutor about that, and he said, even if everything he did wrong created the problem, if at the moment he shot, he had a realistic reason, even if he was wrong for shooting, that's not criminal.
That's the use of force case law,
I have a feeling that's changing now.
Well, no, that case law remains the same. It's the determination in the moment, right? But I think what we haven't done over the years, and what we were always afraid to do over the years, was hang when we talk about what makes it criminal. So obviously the intent is what makes it criminal, right? So if it's reckless or negligent, or intentional.
Well, in Parkland,
right?
Florida,
So-
they just arrested the guy for not running to
Right.
save
So
someone.
you're starting to see now what we didn't see before is we're hanging those negligent and reckless terms on police officers, which we were very afraid to do for a long, long time.
And well, how does intent figure into that? Are you intentionally negligent,
Well,
intentionally
no,
reckless?
it's one of the criminal mindsets. When you commit a crime, how do you commit the crime? What's your mindset? Are you acting recklessly?
Right. We just talked about on the
intentionally?
hill. I don't know if the guy
Right.
was trying to kill someone when he's shooting out of his truck. He's mad. He's
So, but
firing,
here's the thing:
he's
so,
reckless.
right? So he's down there. He's engaged in an illegal act. You can make the case that he's acting intentionally. So there's a charge that goes with that.
So what about the cop in Hampton? You said you
probably
wouldn't
like
be
a
surprised.
criminal?
Why do you think he'll be charged? What do you think they're going to hang it
Because
on?
I think it's a criminal violation. That's my personal opinion. If
what was his intent?
his intent was not to get out of and kill somebody, but he was reckless and he was negligent. He was negligent because of the way he approached the car, and he was reckless to get out of the car and just begin firing without absolute,
And what about the last part going around the passenger side window? Is there a difference
Right. I think
under criminal statute for how he behaved there?
What do you mean? Is there? I think that's a reckless move as well. I think that's. I don't think he's going over there saying to himself, "These guys are shooting at me now. I'm going to take out this passenger."
So reckless behavior. People do reckless behavior every day. What makes it criminal?
It's part of the criminal. The act itself is criminal, and then why the mindset
Right.
they're in when
That's
they
why
commit
you have
that
negligent
act.
homicide and all of
Right.
those things.
So so Gene Gagliardi, Townsend Avenue, years ago, he gets into a fight with his wife. He stabs his wife in the neck with a carving knife, right? We arrest him for murder. It gets knocked down to manslaughter. He says, "Listen, I was mad and enraged. I just swung the knife, and it hit her in the neck. I really wasn't even trying to stab her. I was just trying to scare her, swing in the neck." So he made the case that he intentionally didn't go to her and drive the knife through her neck. However, he was acting so recklessly, it resulted in her being stabbed.
He was doing something that could stab her. And
Sure,
he's responsible for that.
So he's responsible for it. So yes, so that's when I think the officer's actions, my personal opinion, is that he was very reckless, very negligent. I think that a lot of us would be very difficult to argue that.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one. When they go by the law and they tell you, you have certain, if you feel threatened, you have certain rights to defend yourself. I mean, when they put this in front of a jury, it becomes kind of hard. It's a hard call.
So here's self-defense shooting. I shoot somebody. Okay, so that act of shooting somebody is a criminal violation. Now I have to determine if it was criminal, why it happened, right? Can I use the self-defense? Was it self-defense? Was it intentional, or was it reckless? Was I just firing a gun arbitrarily in that area? And the guy got shot?
Reckless. Now the guy who's shooting at the passenger, right? But there's shots flying already, so he feels threatened. And I'm not trying to take his side here, but I'm saying he's gonna say he felt threatened, and the bullets are already flying.
Right.
So he's taking action.
He also has an obligation to try and determine what's going on. In other words,
absolutely.
Because you get into a police shooting, even if it's justified why the shooting starts, that doesn't mean you get to fire up the town. You're supposed to still remain in control and trying to figure out what's going on. He didn't. He was negligent. If he's going to fire, he retreated at one point and then started coming back. Retreat, figure out what's going on. He's negligent for not trying to get a better picture about what was going on.
Seth Poole writes in, it's quoting Inspector Deck. Never heard of Inspector Deck. Have you heard of Inspector Deck?
He's in the Wu-Tang Clan, yes, of course.
Oh.
And stray shots, all on a Bach that stays hot. Leave it up to me, and I'll be living proof to kick the truth to the young black youth.
I'm going to get Seth a Wu-Tang shirt. Tell him.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today on WNHH-FM's Dateline New Haven. Thanks to our guest, WNHH resident criminal justice expert John Velleca, and Harry Droz, not only a great conversation partner, but the miracle man behind the controls as WNHH station manager. Thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.